The ACN podcast is made possible thanks to the generosity of our listeners and sponsors, including the Agile Alliance. As a nonprofit membership organization, the Agile Alliance is an excellent resource to help you along your Agile journey. To learn more about the Agile Alliance and our other sponsors, as well as how you can become a sponsor or supporter of our show, please visit acnpodcast.org for more information. And thank you for your support. Good morning and good evening, everyone. This is the Agile Coaching Network. This podcast is brought to you by Agile Alliance. Agile Alliance is a nonprofit organization that's been in existence since the start of the manifesto. Agile Alliance became a proud sponsor of this particular event. And since then, the cornerstone members, the corporate support that goes into that organization, as well as the individual membership into the organization, has helped them to go fund some really great industry initiatives, including being able to get us together as one of them. Also, the ability for things like the 5 Saturdays program, where Dr. Dave gets together with some great students and teaches them life skills with Agile practices. Those types of things really just are the reasons why I became a member, and I do encourage you to become a member as well. If you look at what Agile was originally tooled for, was the ability to deal with very complex situations where we couldn't see everything ahead of us, and we knew that even though we would write a requirement down or we had the capability of looking at our particular product that we're doing, that disruptions occur within the grander perspective of things. And so with that, what I want to ask is I would like everyone to think about stories about where Agile practices helped you deal with a major disruption that happened within your business or even in your life in a way that really added value to your customer or added value to what you were trying to go off and accomplish. On the flip side of that, I'd also like to hear stories about when you ignored the signals that were coming from Agile, where something was coming up where, let's say, either through a retrospective or through a product demo or something, that it just looked like, we are just going in the wrong direction and we need to pivot, but we ignored it and disaster happens after that. So with that, just as that is the starting of the framing question, let's see. Shauna, do you want to share a great story of either one of those?
Sure. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the disruption more at the organizational level. I think there's a lot of things that come in at the team level, but organizational disruption is really interesting to manage. And so, obviously COVID was a really good example of that, everybody quickly having to go work from home. For startups, for instance, let's say that they're going to go public. Something like that is a hard challenge because it ends up throwing into place a lot of controls that an organization may not have had to adjust to in the past. So things like now they're under auditing and there's a lot of budgeting protocols in place. And so if you were working at a startup that, let's say, had a lot more autonomy to be able to work the way that they wanted, or people were wearing a lot of hats, all of a sudden, it's almost like you've got this PMO type structure that's been thrown in place. And so for me personally, it's been an interesting journey. I've worked at both startups and at scaled organizations. And I find that when something like that happens, it's being able to balance the autonomy, the culture of the organization, as well as the controls and structure that need to be in place in order to operate and run the company. And so continuing to sort of figure out how to manage those functions in a way, and I think for a lot of us who do work at the Agile coaching level or as project managers, we see this pull often in every organization. And I think that we tend to feel it a lot. And so the balance and being able to recognize, and I think continuously taking the Agile approach of continuously learning and figuring out how we can get better and maintain a balance is really important. And so through the journey, in particular in the startup culture, I think having retrospectives often at the organizational level is something, as well as continuing to kind of guide and understand your maturity and where you're at in the scale of being a high performing or an agile organization, and knowing what the targets are that you want to get to and where you're starting from is really important, and having some open and honest conversations about it as an organization. And I feel like the sooner that companies can start doing that, the better off they will be in the long run.
Thank you for that. I'm kind of curious when you said sort of the PMO structures and everything else sort of building up. I always found that crisis sets in, that's really the true test of whether or not your training and everything else stuck.
Yeah.
And do you find that suddenly we're being agile, and then when crisis hits, suddenly we're falling back into old patterns? Was that something that was occurring with you?
I think that it's twofold. Yes, old patterns definitely come up, but I think also if you're forced to flex muscles that you're in an area of crisis where you're not comfortable flexing those muscles and having to build process or understand how to do things on the fly, that's when it becomes really difficult and you can kind of see chaos start coming in. And so being able to like put something really scrappy in place, just be okay with like, hey, this is something manual that's not great, but let's just use it for now and keep building on it. Like even that I find hard. People want something a little bit more baked, especially in crisis mode. That's not gonna happen.
Right. Deanna, what about you? What stories do you have to share?
I was thinking about that. I was also thinking that maybe you should call us the irregulars instead of the regulars.
Well, I would never.
That has a different. That's sort of the rebel alliance, the irregulars, right?
That's right. You're part of an agile alliance and a troop.
Yeah, right. One of the things that's been on my mind a lot lately is the way, how we reacted last March, April, May, June, even into July, because we kept hoping it was going to be over in just a few months. And the recognition that we were really going to have to knuckle down and understand this virtual world better than we had before. That I was at a meetup last night and somebody said, well, what's going to happen next since co-located teams are required by Agile? And that surprised me a little bit. Because it's never been a requirement. It's just been, if you can get together, it seems to work better that way, but you work with what you've got. And if you're distributed all over the place, then you've got virtual teams. But anyway, the way that I've been thinking a lot about the way that we adjusted or didn't adjust and how long it took to adjust. I mean, my immediate thought around doing meeting facilitation and training and all of those kinds of things that Agile coaches do was, I have to figure out how to replicate what I do in a workshop room in the online setting. And it took me a while to figure out that online has its own peculiar benefits and useful ways of doing things. And I kind of came up with this carob and chocolate analogy. I like chocolate a lot. I like training in a workshop room a lot with people there. And, over time, if I try to make carob taste like chocolate, I'm always going to be unsatisfied with it. But once I figure out there are reasons to like carob for its own taste and its own flavor, then I can manage both, and I can decide when I want to eat which one. Food metaphors coming to me very easily. But the same thing is like in the virtual world, how do we take advantage of these tools that are available to us? And man, did they get busy improving themselves. kudos to Zoom and, all of the tools that are out there, because most of them, with a few exceptions, got really busy getting better and providing more features. It took us a long time to learn that there are things we can appreciate about training and facilitating in a virtual space, and things we can use there that we could never do when we were in person, things that wouldn't work when we were in person. And just last night, a guy named Mike, who was at a meetup I was speaking at, said that one of the ways that he helped his team gain coherence once they went online, and they were a little bit reluctant to turn on their videos, so they were all sitting there with little black boxes with their names in them. He started declaring that Friday was, or some day of the week was color day for their meetings. And so he just randomly started declaring a color. Next Thursday, the day we do all of our meetings is blue day or red day or whatever. And the idea was people would show up dressed in those colors, right? And at first, only a couple of people, the kind of hell fellow well met kind of folks complied with that and got on board. But after a while, more and more of his team members, until all 9 team members were showing up at those meetings wearing that color. And the interesting thing about it was the way that built some coherence within that team, created some connections and some conversations within that team in a way that everybody showing up in the same color in a conference room would never have done. It would have just been a mild, oh, look, you got the memo kind of thing, right? But visually seeing everybody in the same color on a screen really sent a message that we're a team together. And so there are a lot of those kind of tricks and tips that I've learned over the year. And I'm going to be, as I look ahead and realize things are going to shift again pretty soon, and that's unclear to us what that's going to be like. What of these lessons can I bring with me going forward? And so I think today's topic is a great one for that reason. They're just some really interesting things that we can do in this virtual world that we can't do when we're co-located, or haven't done in the past anyway, when we were co-located, that I will be sorry to lose. But it took me a while to recognize them. And I think, and the other coaches I've talked to, this is how we've kind of shared our stories. They also struggled with this and wanting everything to be like a physical classroom at first, and being frustrated about the fact that it wasn't. And until they, learned more about the tools and the capabilities, that the new potential that they had at hand.
I agree with you on all of those points. And I think sort of this harkening back to the days that we used to go to a video store and rent a video. And, there was a little bit of romance there, but there was also a lot of difficulties. And, when models shift or, disruptions occur within the environment, and I even see it with some of our practices when we talk about, the physical events, or as you said, the carob versus, baking something in a way where we're trying to mimic that physical environment versus improve the tools, make the tools better. Pete actually told us, by the way, that our name should be more like Guerrilla Agile Coaches, which I think is an interesting.
I like that, Pete. I'm on board with that.
Awesome. Jorg, what do you have on this?
Maybe where Agile really helped me was, let's say, really stretching disruption. So my first company I worked with, I stayed with nearly 15 years, and then they closed the site where I was working pretty much on very short notice. Good thing was the part of the business I was in, which was automotive, was continued, but as a standalone small company. So all the things of behavior and focus shifted. And that company was only to survive if we really kept the smart people together. And here the good thing was we were just transitioning to Agile. That was first time we touched Scrum long time ago. And we just could really put all the concerns on the table and actually acknowledge that, yeah, we don't know what the future will hold, how this will work out. But we stuck together as a team, and we actually increased our performance by that trust that we all knew we are now in absolutely uncharted waters after a long time together in extreme safety, which then proved to be absolutely unsafe. But we had the strength of showing we could change. So we could deal with that challenge very easily by just getting that trust established early on. That was extremely important as well for me in terms of learning. And touching on the other side, so where did I fail to see the signs? That's when they get as close to me as possible, because that's when I'm doing something wrong, especially when I try to enable more people to think, work, and act more productively, more effectively. And that's beyond my personal capability, because it's too many people, too many interactions. Then I don't get the signs early on, so I try to do more things than is healthy for me and the people around me, which is sad, because then they don't get what I'm trying to tell them, and they learn more slowly or even get it wrong. If I had stepped back and said I couldn't do it, that would have been probably much more productive for them. That's why I'm trying to be cautious, but I know I have a weakness.
I appreciate that insight. Sheila, what do you have on this?
Hi, how are you?
Happy Friday.
Yeah, happy Friday. Very excited about this Friday. Before I get into this, I don't know if this is proper to say, but I wish your partner well. I am a breast cancer survivor, so I just wanted to throw that out there.
Well, you can't see me on video, but there's a virtual hug coming your way.
8 years now, so
Awesome.
there you go. So I have so many different disruption stories too with my client, but I really want to do a shout out to my husband and how he has used principles of Agile to pivot as a high school teacher. With COVID, high school teachers have had to become extremely agile. They have had to, we had to create a space where he could teach remote that would be quiet enough, and we're in New York City, so that's a little bit of a challenge. We had to figure out how he could teach, how do you do tests, and you had to really be able to try things, and if they didn't work, try something else, because this was a new thing. Nobody had really done this before in this setting. It's not like college. So we had tried a whiteboard. We tried painting our wall as a whiteboard, and it was a lot of glare, and the students couldn't really see it. So we had to pivot and say, okay, so what do we do next? So we bought an actual whiteboard, which was a lot better. But after a while, with all of the erasing and stuff on the whiteboard and cleaning it off and certain things that were going on with technology, a lot of students were also, again, saying that they couldn't see it as well as they would like. So then it was, what do you do with that? And so then it was buying a board to write on that would be, good for teaching. And that's where my husband wound up with teaching. And then again, facilitating tests and all of those things. I have been really impressed with my husband and his other teachers, with what they have done to make this work. And they've all had to be very agile about it.
Did they know that they were agile before?
Some of them no, some of them yes, because I think as a teacher, you always have to have that agility, but I don't think some were aware of what it was. The ones that I'm friends with, they're very well aware because I constantly bring it up to them. But yeah, and they're agile even when they're teaching in a classroom, but this was to a much greater degree. One of his colleagues didn't have enough space, so she had to see if it was okay to go out to her parents, who lived in a big house, and she moved back in with her parents in order to make this happen. So people have done a lot of things and come up with solutions and have done all kinds of trial and error, which is really, that whole iterative approach to it. And that's how everybody started with this from a teaching standpoint.
Well, cool. That is a great story. I really appreciate that. Pamela, are you there?
So it's been very interesting to have my college-age son at home for this semester, and he is doing his classes online. And one of the classes that he is taking is in software engineering, and the professor is actually having them do their projects using Agile. So it's just very interesting that they are teaching Agile in a college setting to prepare them for what most companies are or have already moved to. And what's nice is that the kids, they have a 2-week sprint. Every 2 weeks, somebody else gets assigned as the Scrum Master. The professor is the product owner, which is actually kind of interesting. And then the rest of them are developers. So it's very interesting to see how the college kids are being taught Agile, how to work together, points, hours, prioritization, building up a product backlog, and building up a sprint backlog, and the differences in the two. So it has been very interesting, and I am very delighted, and also I'm proud of my son for embracing this, because this is what he is going to be doing when he graduates next May.
That is awesome. One of the things that's impressed me, and I remember the first time that we were using Kanban in the house, and my partner has always said, keep that Agile stuff at work, and keep it over there. And I remember that we were having some struggles and some difficulties with one of our sons about being able to have a good balance of time, and he was bringing in affectionately too much work in progress, and he was stressing himself out and all those things. Long story short is, I taught him one time, and over the process of the next couple of weeks, he improved, his mood improved, and he taught the rest of the family how to go use a Kanban board, and they cropped up all over the house, which was really cool. And my youngest daughter at the time went off and started teaching to the Montessori kids at the school she was at, which was also totally awesome as well. So life skills and some of the stuff that we do in Agile, I think absolutely that those go together. Jonathan, are you there?
Hey there, Ray. Yeah, I'm here. I would just like to totally agree with you and everybody else who's been talking about how Agile, whether Kanban, Scrum, or any of the different types of frameworks being used in school, is very powerful for the students. We look at education today, before last year, and there were a lot of teachers that were making big improvements in teaching students. And then you had groups of teachers who were just printing out Scantrons, printing out stuff in books, and then just giving it to students and doing work. So there wasn't really any critical thinking on the students' parts. But as, hearing about how these teachers, these educators are using Agile, I can hear the empowerment in the students that's giving them the reasons to be more involved in their own education, and it's causing them to be able to do critical thinking, especially for their futures. So it's great to hear that. And I just commend everyone who is a part of the education system, and well as got family members who are a part of the education system that are challenging students to do critical thinking. So I just wanted to commend that. And
I don't feel like I'm breaking my own rule about, plugging a for-profit thing, because this isn't a for-profit thing I'm going to talk about. But if you go look at organizations like the 5 Saturdays program, you can go up to the Agile Alliance website, look under our initiatives, and look for the work that Dave Cornelius is doing, Dr. Dave is doing with children and helping them, teaching them life skills. The people who volunteer in that and teach Agile to those young adults, they're having really great success, in times when giving them those skills to go off to college or do other things is, I think that is just really, really cool stuff. Sheila, you put your hand up. Sheila, are you there?
Oh, okay, yeah, it mute it and then unmute it.
Sorry, that was me pushing buttons. Buttons aren't toys. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I don't know. I figured I'd be way in the queue because I had a disruption with my client that didn't have to do anything with COVID or having to, it had more to do with some customers of theirs coming and really from a client base coming up with a new standard that they wanted to be using than the one that was currently being worked on. So they had to pivot greatly to make that new, to go away from the old standard and work toward the new standard, but still support people who were using the old standard. So this was like a big thing for them, and it was important to use Agile principles and to work toward that. And also what they had done previously, doing that in such a way that it would be flexible to move forward if something like this happened. So they were allowed to pivot easily and to support these new clients that were looking for something a little bit different than the older clients. And I've been working with them on finishing that up. There's, iteratively changing and working with the clients to try things in small pieces before like trying to put the whole solution in place. So it's been an interesting trip that we've been taking on this new standard that has to go in place.
That's a great story. I mean, one of the things that I see with some teams, and I'm sure Shauna, you could probably relate to this as well with some of your history, is that when Agile only goes so far up in the organizations and responding to different signals, we had this one product that they literally didn't want to show it to the customer because they were afraid the customer wouldn't like it. And reality was they were right, but yet they still continue to ignore the symbols out of hiding the demo to the point where it's like, we're just burning cash. And it doesn't make any sense to do that. And the reason why I'm dragging you into this, Shauna, is that I know that when you were talking about some of your transformation stuff in the past, and you and if you don't mind me saying, a vice president within an organization, Agile goes very high within your organization. Have you found that removed a lot of impediments?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that you were touching on, Ray, is transparency, and with that comes psychological safety, and that psychological safety has to start at the leadership level so that people feel safe showing work that may not be done or that may not meet the perceived needs of the organization. And so being able to have open dialogue and have that a safe place where teams feel that can do that, I think is really important. And so, in terms of anything from disruption to transformation, being able to have teams, especially when they're in crisis mode, let's say that there's something like a security breach or something like that, where everybody kind of, something like that would disrupt a company instantly, because all of a sudden all of their practices have to change and things have to be put on hold in order to take care of it. And having a safe place where teams can get their heads together, not feel like they're quote unquote in trouble for doing something in a way that where somebody else at the leadership level may be doing it differently. Like, it's really about having a place to experiment and to try things new. Like, that's where I think, in terms of disruption, being an agile organization comes into play.
That's really good. Actually, with that, I think I'm going to pivot to one of the other questions that we had up on Slido that's along this line. And the question comes from an anonymous person. They didn't put their name on here. The question that they asked was, what are some of the best practices and now let me start that again. It's easy for me to talk today. What are some of the best practices and exercises to build trust in order to increase psychological safety within agile teams? So that kind of dovetails a little bit into what you were just saying. Do you have some suggestions there?
I'm a firm believer in terms of just straight up practices. Like, I think a lot of teams end up dropping their demos because they don't feel like they're buttoned up, or they're not ready to show, they're not ready for prime time. The more that teams are open to demoing unfinished work to the business and to shorten that feedback loop, I find brings stakeholders in and builds so much trust that it's like, okay, the teams are seeing progress, the teams are moving forward, they're open with us about where they're at and where their development is. So that's the one practice that I find to be the one thing that really helps with psychological safety, because if something's not working, it's like, it's cool, we'll just show you at our next demo it working. And all of a sudden it's like everything just becomes a little bit more flexible, and everybody just is like, oh yeah, we're seeing things change, and they're taking our feedback. And the less that we open up that conversation, the more that I see the trust start breaking down, because it feels like the teams are hiding something or they're just not delivering. And so in terms of that organizational flexibility and safety, like, that is really the one practice that I just really firmly believe transforms an organization.
Great. Jonathan, I see you put your hand up. I'll get to you in a second, but I wanted to ask Deanna, how about yourself? What ways do you help to go increase psychological safety with agile teams?
Well, I start out by setting a tone right from the beginning with doing some liftoff activities or chartering, or, getting them talking about things that are not directly the task work, but that how are they going to work together. And I think it's so important to begin the team's journey together with a few of those non-trivial, like work-focused, trust-building activities. No, not take them out to the park and do a trust fall, but keep them working together, and couldn't do that now anyway. But and then things like doing effective, holding effective retrospectives, holding effective and short stand-up meetings, keeping your promises. It's modeling the behaviors of psychological safety for yourself, knowing what your own boundaries are and holding to those, and letting people see that nothing bad happens when you do that. And then making sure that you're being a good bystander. If you see something that is going to disrupt the trust and disrupt the psychological safety on your team, stepping in and saying something about that, noticing when those things are broken down. I mean, I think that's the XP had the value of courage, right? And that really is an agile value. And that's what it means to be a scrum master or a team coach or a product owner, anybody in those leadership roles, to have the courage to help the team by reinforcing the importance of those conditions on the team and stepping up to do that. So, I really try to do that. I feel like and the feedback I've gotten is that this is true. More than anything else, it's the way I model behavior in the world that has a beneficial impact and a positive influence on people. more than what I tell them to do, or, any poster I put on the wall or any of those kinds of things. So that is first and foremost where I start.
Well, you're definitely one of my role models. If you notice, I watch you when you're like doing your magic, so that you have that kind of way about you that it's like, oh, I want to learn that, which is really cool. Jorg, did you want to add anything on that? How do you build psychological safety?
Yeah, actually not much to add to what Diana already said. That's absolutely the key points. Just two things to reinforce that I would add. One is really call out where trust and safety really happens. So acknowledge that, it's good to let go and trust the other guys in the team, or trust management that they will react to an action that you ask them to do. And then if it pays off, make it visible. And the other thing is sometimes making trust explicit is as well what helps. So really saying, I trust you to do this. I will not check on it or anything or control it. But just please tell me if it's not possible. And then really handing this over very actively. That are just the two small additions. But otherwise, it's what you live and what you do matters. What you say doesn't really matter.
Awesome. Jonathan, what do you want to add to this?
I actually wanted to add one quick statement, and then had a question for I can't remember the first person's name that spoke. But my statement was, I 100% agree with everybody that said about really building that trust. I wanted to add that it's really having people who understand that emotional intelligence and can be able to read the room and read the people and how they're feeling, to be able to make sure that they are feeling that safety in order to speak. So in combination with building that trust, creating that trust, you need to make sure you have someone there, if they're a change agent or not, that can be able to identify the emotional IQs of everybody else in that room. And then the question that I had was, when the first speaker was talking about showcasing unfinished work, was that, just for clarification, was that meaning just the increments of work, or are you talking about things that maybe don't pass the definition of done? Just for clarification.
Yeah, so what I'm really talking about is typically at the executive level, who isn't part of the things that are going on within the team, and the questions that always come up whether we like it or not is how much more do we have, and how much longer until we're done. And I think having a clear understanding of what done means, and then kind of giving a visual demo of where we are in the scope of done. So, definition of done, whether you're talking about, I'm not talking about, has it been gone through code review, and have we gone through all the checkpoints to make sure that we can deploy in production? Like, while that's important, especially at the team level, in terms of giving demos to our stakeholders, it's really about being open to say, we've been able to get through, this use case. Let me show it to you. And in terms of our full scope of what it is that we're trying to deliver, here's how far we are. And, continuing on those conversations to reduce toil and reduce the time for feedback. That's really what I'm talking about. Because I think that oftentimes we wait until something is quote unquote done to share. And if it's not if it's from a business standpoint, if it doesn't match, then that's where you really see toil start picking up. So while I agree with Diana and Jorg on kicking off team practices and getting psychological safety within the team, I really do think it starts breaking down at the stakeholder level in terms of teams feeling really unmotivated on what they've delivered, or they'll come out of a meeting being like, wow, that's not what I was expecting. I was really proud of what I delivered. And I think that's so that's really what I'm talking about.
Thank you for that clarification.
Mark, you've got your hand up.
I want to echo the courage and the openness that I kind of heard. I think those are critical. The key thought that has come to me lately is the conditions for success. And what I mean by that is, I've heard people say that trust is an outcome. And I've also heard people say that if we're not talking about competence, then there may not be a limit on vulnerability. So when I think of trust leading, I think of psychological safety as the foundation for trust. And trust as an action, as I've also heard it said, is to go trust someone, even though maybe your confidence is low, because if you don't, then you prevent the opportunity for people to trust each other. So anything you can do to build vulnerability and show vulnerability are great activities within a team. For example, you could tell a story about something that you learned by failing. And all the more poignant is if you messed up in front of the team. And you just tell the team, hey, you know what? I found out I didn't handle this well. I think you guys handled it really well when I messed up, and I'm going to take a failure bow. I borrowed that phrase from a trainer that I respect. And I think I've heard that as well. Just celebrate your wins and celebrate your losses that come with learning. And when someone says, I tried and failed, then you give them a round of applause as well. Those acts of vulnerability, I think, demo trust and vulnerability for your teams. The second activity is to monitor those in your team that are very vocal. I can tend to be very vocal myself, so I have to monitor myself. If you step back and you ask the person that's quietest and give them the opportunity to pass, but say, hey, I'd love to hear what so-and-so thinks. We don't get to hear from you so much. Just those little things show the team the culture that we should model. And I think pretty soon that becomes the norm. And then when they experience anti-patterns, they're probably going to be a little more courageous because they're like, well, that's different. We don't do it that way. And then you can just continue to encourage them from there.
I like all of those. We used to do several different exercises, especially for young managers. And this was, how do you go create emotional safety within groups when we're all type A's? And the organization I used to work for, everyone was a type A, and we were trying to get more diversity into the workforce. And as we brought in other people who weren't the type of people who just eat their dinner straight out of the pan, could we help them to find a voice, a safe voice? And I know that there was really hard experiments of just playing some games like, and I know that, the trust games and all of those sometimes get a little bit hokey, but, work on something together and then making sure that we do get the table talking and making sure that we're getting that full voice, or the organizational brains working on this, not just a few very outspoken individuals. So that resonates. And then the other thing that was really resonating with me was, and I'll share this story, it was with a former CEO, and I used to be with Intel Corporation, and he was retiring. And he took the stage and he talked about when the first time that Intel Corporation walked away from the table with Steve Jobs for putting an Intel CPU in a smartphone. And literally, this is the day that he's leaving the company, he's leaving that job and somebody else is taking over. And I'm sitting in the audience just thinking to myself, this is the first time he's ever really exposed to failure. And this particular failure, if you guys know the story about this, Intel not getting a CPU in the Apple iPhone was a major loss for the company, potential income and everything else. And here he is sharing this. And I thought to myself, wow, he's human for the first time. I was able to connect with him at a level that in all other interactions that I had with the person over my 30 years at the company, that why am I getting this the last day? And so I've made it a point in my own management toolkit and my coaching toolkit that, yes, story is incredibly important, and being able to go bring those up in a way that is not just all the peaches and cream and all the goodness that we can do in the world with what we've accomplished, but that vulnerability of, remember that big mistake that I had? And I think somebody had said about the bowing, failing with style, and just really owning the fact that we learned something, and we learned something really well. We're approaching the top of the hour. This was a great discussion this hour. It was just absolutely hilarious that we were going to talk about disruption at the top, and then my entire system decided to bow to that request and ended up offering me all sorts of weird screens that are all painted in front of me right now, which is I've been trying to do. High recommendation. If you're running a live event, don't go into Task Manager to start to go kill processes, because you don't know what those things go to. Couple of things that you should be aware of, and you just absolutely got to go take advantage of it, because there's only a few more days left. So Agile 2021 is happening. I've had a pet. I'm not on the team that goes and picks the talks and sets up the whole thing. There's a really great volunteer army out there that puts together the conference, but I've been one of the persons that's been helping with some of the messaging and other things that are on there. And I was looking at just how cool this event is going to be this year. And right now there is early bird special that's available to both Agile Alliance members. You get to be able to join into the round the clock, and I do literally mean round the clock, time friendly for everyone on the planet conference this year. There's going to be activities that are going to be, if you're in India, no, you do not have to get up in the middle of the night to have fun. You can actually do that during your day. Same thing with other parts of the world as well. So they're doing a really good job at structuring that. I would really love that you guys come attend. I know that we're going to do a couple of networking events with ACNers, and we're going to do some networking events with also, hopefully maybe get a business agility lab going. Unclear whether or not that's happening again for the people who've been to those labs. I help facilitate those. I hope that it occurs. And if it does, I want to be able to interact and talk and share these great types of stories almost in person. This, in the virtual space itself. But anyway, important, get the early bird special. It's ending like in a few days, so go do that. The other thing is, I'm going to just do another thing. I did this last month. Agile Alliance does need your help. COVID as a disruption, if you go look at the way that we finance our mission, we do that through membership. And membership is the way that we are able to go fund great programs, like when I talked about, Dave's work, Dr. Dave's work with the 5 Saturdays program, or any of the other 13 initiatives. Some people might think that we're rolling in the cash. No, we're a nonprofit organization, and we absolutely encourage you to become a member to support the mission of the organization. And the way that you do that is you just go to the website. It's $49 for an individual membership. If you got a corporation, we'd love to have you as a corporate member. Just go do that, and just push that button. That helps us to run shows like this. With that, I'm gonna just say that I really appreciate all of the efforts of my regulars, or the guerrilla Agile Army, or whatever we called Deanna, Jorg, and Shauna. I couldn't do that without you. Hendrik's not here this week. We miss him. Couldn't do this show without you. You guys are the smart people in the room, and really it helps me out quite a bit, and I appreciate it. So with that, have a great month. This podcast is provided by Agile Alliance for educational and informative purposes only. To find out more information about the member-supported Agile Alliance, please go to agilealliance.org to find out about more upcoming events, as well as different programs that are available to help you with your Agile journey.